Wolverhampton Wanderers are set to sign Jhon Arias from Fluminense for a reported £19 million. Now let's speak a bit about what I think he could bring to Wolves and also what I think about Wolves' prospects next season. So let's get straight into this one. Now, I personally think Jhon Arias is an absolutely outstanding signing for Wolverhampton Wanderers, especially for the fee. It's reported that the fee is going to be £14.7 million plus a further £4.3 million on top of that in add-ons, which I think is absolutely ludicrous business anyway, because he may not achieve those add-ons. Hopefully he does for Wolves' sake as a side, but he may not, and they may have got him for a really reasonable fee. Now, there's also a 10% sell-on clause in there. Liam Keane and Nathan Judah have both reported in the Express and Star earlier this week, which again I think is a fine deal for Wolves really, because Jhon Arias, 27 years old, you wouldn't imagine they're going to sell him for at least 3 years because, players tend to hit their prime these days around 28 to 30. So, if Wolves can keep him until 30 years old and maybe sell him on for a profit, that 10% won't really sort of make a massive difference to them. And even if they sold him for what they basically bought him for, it's £1.9 million if he meets all the add-ons, 10%. So, it's not too much of an issue. Now, I really like Jhon Arias in a lot of ways. And it's all good me coming on here and speaking about his technical ability. And, that I will do in this video in abundance, I'm sure. But one thing I love about Jhon Arias is his work rate. Now, last season, when Wolves started picking up those results, it was when Cunha was out of the team. And you know me, I was heavily criticising Matheus Cunha of his work rate. Yeah, it's fine having those Mavericks that, he's kept Wolves up last season, essentially, really. As much as I probably don't want to think it and other Wolves fans don't want to believe it. But essentially, his goals and assists did keep them up. But that's not sort of a sustainable way of staying in the Premier League as a team. And also, sort of expanding your ambitions, and you just can't have those players around the squad. And all the good teams have those hard-working footballers. You even think back to like the Liverpool team 1920 and that era really. Gini Wijnaldum was at the heart of that side and he provided the energy for that. And obviously Marshall Monetzi, when he came into that side last season, yeah, he's not the most technically brilliant footballer, and I'll probably be one of the first people to tell you that. But what Marshall Monetzi does have in abundance is that work rate and that ability to facilitate Jurgen Strand-Larsen. Now, this is where I think Jhon Arias massively comes in, because he has the work rate but also the technical ability. So it gives Wolves a few options next season. Do they play Fer Lopez, the brand new signing from Celta Vigo, off the right where Monetzi was playing, and let Jhon Arias down the left, despite Jhon Arias' best football actually coming off the right for Fluminense in the last few years, despite being able to play both positions? Or do they play both Monetzi and Arias and just have a complete workhorse sort of attack that also facilitates to Strand-Larsen? And Arias also has that bit of maverick about him where he can just make something happen, get a shot off. And we've seen that in the Club World Cup, got a goal and an assist against Ulsan. And I also believe that he's got the most chances created in the Club World Cup as well. I think he had 18 chances created in that tournament, which is absolutely ludicrous. And yeah, I really do like the signing. But like I say, I think his work rate is the most important thing for me. And Vitor Pereira demands that as a bare minimum for his players. He really does. And that's why I'm so excited about the signing, because I know that he's not one of these players that's going to come in and slack off. And it's been very sort of clear in the media, and he's made it very clear to everyone that his dream is to play in the Premier League. And you often see that with those South American, Colombian players that have come from nothing. I think of Luis Diaz, for example. His dream was to play in the Premier League. Ultimately, it looks like his dream to play in the Bundesliga or the La Liga now. But in terms of getting to the Premier League, that is what all these players dream of and South Americans dream of. So I think he's going to absolutely bring that in abundance as well. That's just a little thing that I wanted to speak about before we get into his technical ability and what he actually offers Wolves on the ball. Now, general consensus among South American football fans and avid watchers of South American football is that Jhon Arias has been the best player, or one of the best players, in the division for a long, long time. You think of, Andre before him was probably renowned as probably the best player in the division as well, really. One of the best midfielders in the Premier League as well, in my personal opinion. I think he's been absolutely outstanding for Wolves. But Jhon Arias has absolutely been up there the last few years. I mean, if you just take a look at the stats alone, it's absolutely ludicrous. You look at 2022, 33 goal contributions in 62 games, 59 games played there and 28 goal contributions there. Obviously struggled with injury in that part of the season there, but then he had, 51 games played, 14 goals, 7 assists. Just absolutely ludicrous, really. In this season so far, 35 games played, 4 goals, 13 assists. Now, the fact that they are still in their season, Fluminense, I think plays a massive part in this. It gives Jhon Arias time to also learn the system in pre-season. That's what pre-season's for. But also the fact that he will be a lot sharper than most of the players you would imagine. And often when you see players signed from South America, during this part of the season. They start the season, they hit the ground running, and that's one thing I'm really excited to see with Jhon Arias, because he is so exciting to watch. He's pacey, he's raw, but he's also got that technical ability in the final third, and that ability to get a shot off, create an angle for a cross, and just generally a really exciting player to watch. And I think there's a lot of strengths that Jhon Arias has. I think his pressing is absolutely brilliant, and the stats will tell you that. The running figures will tell you that as well. I've said his work rate's absolutely outrageous, but I do love his ability to find that half a yard of space, whether it's off the right, whipping a ball across the box, whether it's off the left, cutting inside, hitting it, whether it's from a dead ball situation like we saw in the Club World Cup as well. He's just very comfortable in all facets of the game, really. The only thing I'd say he is very weak on is his aerial ability, but that's what you've got Jürgen Strand-Larsen for, and that's never going to be the game of a Wolves number 10 in this Vitor Pereira system. It wasn't Marshall Monetzi's sort of role. It really wasn't. His role was to get on the end of Strand-Larsen flick-ons, really. Even though Strand-Larsen doesn't do them a hell of a lot for a big man. But I do think Jhon Arias has a really key part to play in Wolves' attack next season. And the fact they've replaced Matheus Cunha with Jhon Arias, really, when you look at £19 million for £62.5 million, it's a really, really good replacement. And, Wolves have got a lot to do this summer still, with the likes of Nelson Semedo not extending his contract. There's been absolutely no word about that, which I think is absolutely crazy, really. I mean, turning down the highest paid player at Wolves, 4-year deal for a bloke that's 31, 32 already. It's absolutely crazy. The opportunity to captain a Premier League side as well. And also a side, by the way, that I think, are going to take a real sort of positive trajectory in the next few months, next few years. And under Vitor Pereira, you can really see that. It's just whether the owner's willing to spend the money. But having already brought in Fer Lopez and Jhon Arias, looks to be around £38 million for the both of them. Really good business. Fer Lopez is very raw, but we will discuss that a little bit now. So let's look at what I think the squad will be on the first day of the season. Now, this is what I think the starting lineup will be on the opening day of the season. Now, you might think, what are you doing? You've got Marshall Monetzi in there and a player that Wolves haven't even signed yet, or two players Wolves haven't even signed yet, really. But Jhon Arias there, as you can see, it's not the actual Jhon Arias. He's just not available on the website that I used, so I've had to use a Colombian by the name of Jhon Arias. Anyway, but this is the lineup that I think Wolves will go with next season. Now, if they sign Mark Pubil at right wing back, I think it'd be a really astute signing. And again, the fee doesn't look to be absolutely sort of astronomical. Although they do face sort of trouble with AC Milan being in the mix for him as well, and I think that will be quite telling. AC Milan, a massive global club, but if Wolves can manage to get him, what a coup that would be as well. I think he's had a really, really good season in Spain, and he just looks like a really, really brilliant footballer for someone that's also a good age profile for Wolves. And I think one of the more interesting things I should speak about as well in this lineup is the fact that I've gone for Mosquera at right centre back. Now, obviously, we've seen Mosquera out for a very long time. But I do think that will be the back three next season. I do think that has to be the back three. I'm also, not very sold on Jose Sarr, but I think he will still be there next season. And yeah, I think Yerson Mosquera will slot in that sort of that back three and make what is a really, really good back three. Totti Gomez, absolutely brilliant. I really, really rate him. And Agbadou completely changed Wolves' fortunes when he come in. Absolutely sensational season last year. Now, the left wing back, I've gone for Hugo Bueno, and I don't think Hugo Bueno is particularly ready to be a Wolves left back just yet. But there's not that many links to him. Now, obviously, I would love to see Samuel Lino come in. And if they can get Samuel Lino over the line from Atletico Madrid, I think he will be starting in that position. And what a deal that would be, by the way. But just for now, I've gone for Hugo Bueno. I'm not overly confident that he comes in just yet. So I've just stuck Bueno there. But the front three is where it gets interesting. Now, obviously, Strand-Larsen was always going to be the number 9. He always was going to be. However, I've gone for Marshall Monetzi. Now, you might think that's a bit mad. That Fer Lopez isn't in there, Wolves having spent a fair bit of money on him. But I do think on the first game of the season, they've got a really tough game, first of all. And against Manchester City, you need that work rate. You need that sort of desire. And I think Monetzi does have that. However, I'm not saying that Fer Lopez doesn't have that work rate. I just think this is, for opening day of the season, every manager usually tends to pick the players that they trust the most. And I think Vitor Pereira really trusts Marshall Monetzi. He really does. And I think he made that abundantly clear last season that, he's not chipping in with a ridiculous amount of goals or assists, or that's not particularly his game. But in terms of facilitating Strand-Larsen, there's probably not anyone better in that Wolves team to do it, in my personal opinion. So I do think he will go with him. And obviously Manchester City being a massive part of that as well, you do need those type of players. And then I've gone for Jhon Arias off the left. Now, as we briefly spoke about, his best football is played off the right. But I do think Wolves will utilise him as a left-sided winger, to be honest, or a left-sided 10 in this system, almost where Matheus Cunha played, with a bit less licence to do what Mateus Cunha did, and also sort of benefit the system more. And I do think Jhon Arias would suit the left side, really. He's very good at hanging those crosses up into the back post. He's very good at firing those crosses across the box as well. We've seen it a lot off the right, but I'm sure he could do it off the left as well. And we have seen it numerous times with Fluminense. And I do think Jhon Arias would be a really, really brilliant fit for that left winger role, that left cam role, that left sort of attacking midfielder role. I've just said left cam, so we're going to cut that one out because Jesus. But anyway, yeah, I think he'd be really good in that left number 10 role. I think he'd offer a hell of a lot different to perhaps what a John Bellegarde would offer or something like that. I think Jhon Arias will start that game. I would be interested to see if he plays off the left or the right. Equally, if Fer Lopez does play, I believe he'll play here where Manetzi does play. Obviously, Fer Lopez left-footed massively. Reminds me a bit of Sarabia, obviously a lot taller and very technical, but I do think he's got an extra yard of pace as well, and I think he could play this right sort of attacking midfield role really, really well. I do think for the rest of the season it probably will be Fer Lopez and Arias in these 2-10 positions, but just for the opening day I have gone for this because of the opposition and because of what I think Vitor Pereira wants in his side and what he trusts most. So let me know what you think about this in the comments. I think that's probably the best lineup Wolves can have. Obviously if Pubo doesn't come in, you probably see Matt Doherty there, which he had a brilliant season towards the back end of last season, playing as the right-sided centre-half. And we could see him play where Mosquera plays at the start of the season, rushing him in. But I think Mosquera's going to, obviously going to have a full pre-season under his belt. I think he'll be fine to play that role. So let me know what you think about that. I think it's going to be quite tough next season to predict the lineups because Wolves have already brought, 2 players in, and I think there's a lot of movement going in and out. And I think it'd be very interesting to see what the lineup is like. But this is what I've just predicted for the opening day. Now let's take a look at the Wolverhampton Wanderers squad so far for the 25-26 season. As you can see, the goalkeepers, I can't imagine there'll be too much movement around that. Sam Johnson is linked to Sunderland and I think he probably should go. I think it's one of the worst deals that Wolves have ever done, and that's saying something with the likes of Fabio Silva and Patrick Cutrone. We will discuss Fabio Silva a little bit though. The defenders now, Kiana Herver's been quite prominent in pre-season so far, which is quite interesting. Again, I don't think he's the worst option. I just think his sort of the way he's treated the club and the way the club have also probably treated him in the last few years probably doesn't help his case there. But I do think he's got bags of potential still, and he played really, really well for Stoke the last 2 years, and I think he could really break into that Wolves side, but I'm sure most Wolves fans won't want to hear that. So I'm not going to sort of touch on that too much, but I think he definitely has a place within the squad. Now, Santiago Bueno, I don't think he'll be playing a hell of a lot next season, in my personal opinion. Nelson Semedo, I'm not sure why he's here. I assume it's because he hasn't given a sort of, it hasn't fully been confirmed that he's not going to, take up that contract offer, but I don't think he will be. Obviously, Pedro Lima could play on that wing-back position as well next season, but I don't know if he's ready yet. I really don't. I think a loan would suit him, or being a bit part player throughout the season, a bit of rotation. I think he's got bags of potential. I just don't think he's quite ready yet, similar to Hugo Bueno on that opposite side, really. But Bueno's got a bit more sort of skin in the game, really, obviously having had a really good season for Feyenoord. Now, the midfielders is really interesting. It looks so light in that midfield, doesn't it, really? When you look at it, I mean, Bellegarde is really considered as a forward for Vitor Pereira. We've seen that last season. Boubacar Traoré could potentially leave on loan. It looks like he will leave on loan. Joe Hodge, not a Premier League footballer. Tawanda Chirewa, I like him, but I don't think he's a Premier League footballer. I think he's a very good Championship footballer, and that will be his career, really. Andre and João Gomez, the best midfield, one of the best midfielders in the league, in my personal opinion. That's just how I think. If you're not a Wolves fan watching this and you disagree, fair enough. But I think João Gomez and Andre is arguably the best midfield duo, one of the best duos in the Premier League anyway. Then, the attack's really promising. Enzo Gonzalez back from massive injury, and I would like to see him play minutes this season. I think he's got bags of potential. Gonzalo Guedes, I've never seen him smile so much in pre-season. It's a bit of a mad one. I do think he will be exiting the club this summer. Rodrigo Gomez, another one you could consider as a fullback option, but also plays in that front line as well. Sasa Kalajic, I'm sure, he's had a decent start to the pre-season, scored a nice goal the other day in a game that Wolves ultimately lost. But I think they could either, get a bit of money for him or keep him around the squad. You could do far worse than him, I suppose, if he can stay fit. Plus, obviously, Jørgen Larsen being that starting number 9 will allow him to stay fit. So, it's definitely an option to keep around. Hwang Hee-chan, linked to Birmingham, linked to a lot of clubs. Wolves should have probably sold him when they did, when they could have done, to Marseille off the back of a very good season, the season before last. But I don't think he will be around the squad much longer. Jørgen Larsen, unbelievable footballer. You know my thoughts on him. Fer Lopez going nowhere, obviously. And this man, save this man till last, Fabio Silva. What's going to happen with Fabio Silva? I mean, look at the stats there. 7 goal contributions in 62 games. I mean, he absolutely tore the Albion apart. But what happens with him? Wolves have got a lot of suitors for him. Atletico Madrid were in for him at one point. He's had multiple loans now to Anderlecht, to PSV, Las Palmas last season as well. He's just a really confusing footballer. After all their loan fees and getting a permanent fee for him, if they can this summer, they actually probably will be in profit for Fabio Silva, which just blows my mind. But I do think he'll be exiting the club this summer, and he is a bit of an anomaly. But it seems that he's very happy in pre-season, so who knows? But I do think he'll be exiting the club this summer, and yeah, that's what I think about Wolves sort of going into the season, and I think he will be leaving. So let me know what you think about this sort of the squad and how you're feeling about it, Wolves fans, because I really want to know in the comments below as well. How do I think Wolves will do next season? I think Wolves will go on a decent cup run next season. I really do. I'm not sure whether it'll be the Carabao or the FA Cup, but I think they've got a squad ready for a cup run. I know that sounds a bit crazy, but the system they play, the way that Vitor Pereira plays, if they can get drawn at the Molineux, I've been to many Molineux nights in cups, and it's absolutely electric. And I think Wolves do need to get that back. And under Vitor Pereira, we are seeing a bit of a resurgence in the atmosphere at the Molineux, so I hope that does continue to happen. But where do I think they'll finish in the league? It's tough. I think I could see them finishing top half if all the signings work. I really could. I think they could potentially push Europe. But there's a lot of quality in and around those spots at the moment, and I think it'd be really, really quite tough to sort of predict really, and also break into that sort of that clutch of teams really. I think a comfortable Premier League finish, 11th or 12th for Wolves would be a really good season with a nice cup run in there. Give the fans something to feel positive about. Get those big results back against those bigger clubs that we've sort of not seen as much recently. But I'd get the atmosphere back for the Molineux is most important for me. Get that relationship with the players and the manager and the fans all back as well, because it felt very much like that since Vitor Pereira came in last year, and I hope that does continue to grow. But I do think a comfortable 11th, 12th place finish for Wolves would be a very good season. But if they make a few more signings, get a bit more quality through the door, you could potentially see them going on to have what is a really good season and pushing for those European places. But I think it'd be really interesting to see what happens next season, how the signings bed in, who goes now, like for the likes of Fabio Silva, Sasa Kalajic, Hwang Hee-chan, players like that. Joe Hodge, probably maybe another loan, maybe a permanent sell. And just generally, I think it's going to be really interesting to see who comes in, who goes out the door, and what Wolves can do next season. So let me know in the comments, Wolves fans, what you think will happen next season. Let me know in the comments, everyone else, what you think Wolves will be next season, where you think they'll sort of end up, and how they'll perform next season, what players you're most excited to see, whether it's Fer Lopez, whether it's Jhon Arias, whether it's another season of Jürgen Strand Larsen, and I'll see you in the next one.